271 men tried, 271 men failed. Some lasted 12 seconds, some lasted 4, 3 of them left on stretchers. Not one had collected $1. His name was Boyka Volkov, not his real name. In the underground strongman circuit of the late 1960s, almost nobody used real names. The promoters called him The Wall, not because he was hard to hit, because when you hit a wall, the wall doesn't notice, and you walk away with broken hands. He stood 6'4". He weighed 520 pounds. He was 41 years old and had been competing in strongman events, wrestling circuits, and challenge matches across 7 countries since he was 19. He was not fat in the way that word usually suggests. He was constructed, built from the ground up by 22 years of daily work that had compacted his frame into something that did not respond to force the way human bodies were supposed to respond to it. His hands were the size of most men's faces. His chest expanded when he breathed in a way that made the shirts his promoter had custom made for him strain at the seams. He was not a performer in the theatrical sense. He had no catchphrase. He did not work the crowd. He walked to the center of whatever stage he was on, and he stood there, and he let people look at him, and he watched them understand what they were looking at, and then the challenge would begin. The challenge was this: put him down, not knock him out, not pin him, any part of him touching the mat other than his feet, and the money was yours. 20 seconds. That was all you needed. $80,000. Cash. Open briefcase at the stage edge where everyone could see it. Not one person had collected. The record had started in 1969 with a challenge show in Milwaukee that drew 400 people and produced 11 challengers in one evening, none of whom made it past the 15-second mark. Word spread through the strongman and martial arts circuits the way word spread in that community, through gyms and training halls and the specific informal network of people who cared about such things. The challenge went to Detroit, then Cincinnati, then across to the West Coast. By the time it reached Los Angeles in the fall of 1972, 271 men had tried and failed, and the legend around Volkov had taken on the specific quality of things that have been tested enough times that the testing itself becomes part of the proof. He was not unbeatable because of the money. The money was just evidence. He was unbeatable because 271 people had stood in front of him with genuine effort and real training and had been unable to do the one simple thing the rules required. The poster said 20 seconds. Not 20 rounds, not 20 minutes. 20 seconds of keeping him off the mat. Nobody had managed it. 3 days before the Los Angeles show, a telephone rang in a training hall in Culver City. Dan Inosanto answered it. He had been training with Bruce Lee for 5 years. He had 2 tickets to the San Francisco Sports Arena show, the one in 4 days that the promoter had moved to a larger venue because the word of mouth had outgrown every previous venue. But tickets were not why he called. He called because he had been carrying something for 4 days that had no useful place to go except to the one person he knew could do something with it. He said there was a giant, Eastern European, over 500 pounds, 271 men. 3 years of challenge shows across 8 cities. Nobody had put him down. Nobody had come close to putting him down. On the other end of the line, nothing for a moment. Then Bruce said, when he catches someone, where do his hands go first? Dan said the shoulders. He grabs across the shoulders and then pulls in. Bruce said, shoulder grab or neck grab? Dan said shoulder, both hands, across the top. Bruce said, and his feet. When he initiates the grab, where does his weight go? Dan said forward. He drives into it. He uses his mass as the primary tool. Bruce said, does he lead with his right or his left? Dan thought about it. Right. His right hand goes first. The left follows immediately, but the right initiates. Silence again. The specific silence Dan had learned over 5 years to recognize, which was the silence of Bruce's mind, running through something at a speed that made conversation inefficient. Then Bruce said, when the right hand is initiating and before the left has followed, is there a moment where his right side is committed and the left isn't yet? Dan felt the specific chill he felt when Bruce asked a question that revealed something he should have seen himself. He said, yes, maybe half a second. Bruce said, half a second is enough. Dan said he weighed over 500 pounds. Bruce said, his weight is committed to one direction. Committed weight in one direction is not strength. It is momentum, and momentum has a direction. All you have to do is not be in that direction. Dan said, but 271 people had tried. Bruce said, they were trying to resist the momentum. You don't resist 500 pounds, you borrow it. Dan said he was going to come, wasn't he? Bruce said, get me ringside seats. Dan said, what kind of ringside? Bruce said, the kind where I can see his feet before the grab initiates. Subscribe right now. Because what happens when Bruce Lee walks from his ringside seat to the center of that stage is the thing nobody in that building was prepared to see. The San Francisco Sports Arena held 6,000 people when the configuration was set for events like this. On the Saturday evening in October 1972, it held close to 7,000. The extra 1,000 had come through a promoter's decision to oversell slightly, which he had done because the phone had not stopped ringing for 3 days and he was not in the business of turning money away. The air smelled like cigarette smoke, and the specific combination of industrial cleaning fluid and old sweat that belonged to every arena on every sporting circuit in America. The stage was elevated, 3 feet above the floor, wide enough for the challenge to happen without feeling constrained. At the stage edge, on a small table covered in green velvet, sat an open briefcase. The bills inside were real. The promoter had learned early that the crowd needed to be able to see the money clearly, needed to feel the realness of it, because the realness of the money was what made the impossible feel like a choice someone might actually make. At the stage's far end, visible from every seat in the building, was the poster. 271 challengers, 3 years, 8 cities. No man has put the wall on the mat, not for 1 second, not for half a second. $80,000 says you can't either. Bruce was at ringside. He had arrived before the general seating opened, which he had been able to do because Dan's friend knew someone who knew someone, and the result was 2 seats pressed against the stage edge where a man could feel the vibration when Volkov walked and see exactly what his feet were doing before anything else happened. He had been there for 90 minutes. The first portion of the evening's program had gone through 3 demonstration bouts that were genuine and impressive, and that Bruce had watched with the specific total attention he brought to anything he was about to need information from. He had been building a picture. Not just of Volkov, who had walked to the center of the stage during the opening segment to stand while the announcer spoke about him, not moving, not performing, just standing in the way that 520 pounds of developed mass stands, which is with the specific gravity of something that has decided the space belongs to it. Bruce had been watching the feet, he had been watching the hands, he had been watching the right shoulder specifically, and where the weight transferred in the moment before the right hand initiated, and what happened to the left shoulder in the corresponding moment. He had been watching for information. He had found what he was looking for in the first 10 minutes. The 3 challengers who went before the announcer opened the floor were the specific kind of challengers that these shows produced in their later cities, men who had heard the legend and decided they were the exception. A former professional wrestler, 280 pounds, legitimate experience, who lasted 11 seconds before the shoulder grab found him and he tapped with his face turning colors. A boxing trainer from Oakland, 210 pounds, who had worked out a theory about hitting the knees from the outside and lasted 7 seconds before discovering that Volkov's response to knee strikes was to grab the leg, doing the striking, and use it as a handle. A young judoka who had driven from Sacramento specifically for this, 190 pounds of genuine technique, who lasted 16 seconds, which the crowd responded to with specific appreciation because 16 was more than most. After the judoka, the announcer opened the floor. He did it with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for 3 years and understood exactly how to read the room's appetite for more. He gave them the statistics, he recited the record, he held the moment. Nobody moved. He extended the moment further, the specific theatrical technique of letting silence do the work. Still nobody. He was about to pivot to the closing when a man at ringside stood up. He did not raise his hand. He did not call out. He simply stood. He was wearing a dark jacket and dark trousers and flat shoes, and there was nothing about his appearance that identified him as anything, except a man who had been watching the proceedings with careful attention and had now made a decision. He was 5'7". He weighed 140 pounds. The announcer looked at him. He looked at the weight chart his assistant held. He looked back at the man. He said, "Sir." The man said, "I'd like to try." The announcer said, "This is full contact. No weight classes. No." The man said, "I understand what this is." Dan Inosanto, in the seat beside Bruce, leaned over and said something in rapid Cantonese. Bruce answered without looking at him. Dan sat back with the expression of someone who has made a final attempt at the reasonable thing and understands it has failed. The recognition started at ringside, where the martial arts practitioners and serious observers had their seats. It spread outward through the building in the specific wave pattern of recognition in large crowds, slower at the edges where the light was worse and the angle was farther. His name moved through the sections. By the time Bruce reached the stage steps, 3 separate portions of the crowd were responding to the fact of who was walking toward the stage. The response was not uniform. It contained enthusiasm and confusion and the specific alarm of people who had just watched a 280-pound former professional wrestler last 11 seconds, and were now watching a man who looked like he weighed 140 walk toward the same stage with the same casual purpose with which he might walk toward a coffee counter. The stage steps were 4 of them. Bruce took them without adjustment, without preparation, his feet making almost no sound on the wooden surface. Where Volkov's footsteps had made the stage vibrate, Bruce's made nothing. He walked to the center, and for the first time that evening, the crowd saw them both in the same space. The visual arithmetic was immediate and obvious. Volkov stood 6'4" and 520 pounds. Bruce stood 5'7" and 140. The visual was so extreme that several people in the crowd responded to it before anything else happened, responding to the image itself as something that didn't fit correctly in any category they had prepared. The announcer recovered himself. He had a job to do. He approached Bruce with the clipboard. He said name. Bruce said Bruce Lee. He said weight. Bruce said 140 pounds. The announcer's pen stopped. He looked up. He looked at Volkov. He looked at the clipboard. He wrote it down. He said martial arts background. Bruce said Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, various. The announcer wrote it down. He said any medical conditions or injuries we should know about. Bruce said no. He said, but you should make sure the medical team is positioned close to the stage. The announcer said they always kept medical close for the challengers. Bruce said they should keep them close for tonight. The announcer looked at him. Bruce said his expression was perfectly neutral. The announcer walked away. Volkov had been watching from his end of the stage. He watched the way he watched all challengers, which was with the comprehensive disinterest of someone who had sorted 140 pounds into the category it belonged in and had stopped paying attention to additional information. He had been doing this for 3 years. He knew what challengers looked like. He knew what fear looked like in a person who had not decided to show it, which was in the feet, in the quality of how the weight was distributed, in what the hands did when there was no instruction about what to do with them. This challenger's feet were wrong. Not wrong in a way he could name, wrong in the way that something is wrong when it belongs to a different category from what you prepared for. The feet were forward-weighted slightly, not the wide, planted bracing stance of men who were trying to resist being moved, something else. The weight was forward in a way that suggested the man was considering moving towards something rather than preparing to defend against something coming at him. Volkov had never seen that before. He dismissed it. 140 pounds was 140 pounds. The announcer called the challenge to order. He said both parties had been briefed. He said the rules were simple. He said 20 seconds with any part of Volkov other than his feet on the mat, and the challenger collected $80,000. He looked at the crowd. He said, begin. Like this video right now. Because the next 20 seconds rewrote the script that 271 people had confirmed was fixed and unchangeable. Volkov moved at the bell. He moved the way he always moved, the controlled explosion of 520 pounds, finding its direction and committing to it, both arms spreading wide as he closed the distance. The same motion that had ended 271 attempts across 3 years. He closed half the distance. Bruce moved left, not back, left, sideways and slightly forward, a diagonal that took him outside the line of Volkov's approach, while simultaneously closing their relative distance. Volkov's arms reached the space Bruce had occupied. Nothing was there. His momentum carried him 2 steps past his intended destination. He was already turning, already resetting, the reflexes of 3 years of challenge matches recalibrating faster than most men could. He had been evaded before. The evasion never mattered, because he recovered and came again, and eventually the space ran out. He reset. He came again, wider this time, the automatic adjustment of someone who had learned that challengers who moved sideways needed a wider sweep. Bruce moved again, same direction, same diagonal, same slight forward component. As Volkov's right arm came across in the wider sweep, Bruce's left hand found the inside of Volkov's right forearm. 2 fingers, light contact, at the precise point where the momentum of the arm had fully committed to its direction. Bruce added nothing to the momentum. He redirected it. 2 inches of lateral pressure at the moment of full commitment. Volkov's right arm continued past its intended arc by those 2 inches. 2 inches changed where his left arm had to go to close. The left arm followed the right, at a different angle than the coordination required. His own hands met each other. He was briefly, absurdly, gripping himself. The crowd made a sound, not cheering, not yet. The specific sound of 6,000 people encountering something they don't have a category for, and are trying to build one in real time. Volkov separated his own hands. He turned. He was breathing harder. In 3 years, he had never had to breathe hard. Challengers did not make him breathe hard. They got caught, or they ran, until the space ran out, and then they got caught. He looked at Bruce. Bruce was standing where he had been standing after the second redirect. Feet still forward weighted, hands at his sides, not moving, just there. 8 seconds had elapsed. Volkov decided. He decided that the evasion was the trick. That if he could get one hand on this man, any one hand, the evasion would end. One hand on this man was enough. His grip could manage 140 pounds with one hand. He came forward, not in the full-body charge, but in a controlled approach, trying to isolate and land the grip, rather than wrap the full bear hug. He reached with his right hand. Bruce moved inside the reach. Inside, not away. He stepped toward the extended arm rather than away from it, into the space inside Volkov's reach, where the arm's leverage was gone, and his right hand found Volkov's right forearm from underneath. He did not push. He lifted slightly, redirecting the arm's line upward by a small amount. Volkov's committed forward weight, with his right arm now angled up rather than across, lost the balance point it had been organized around. He stumbled, not fell, stumbled, one foot lifting and coming down in a different place than it had been going. But in that stumble, in the half-second of readjustment, Bruce was already moving. He had stepped to Volkov's left side, outside the arm, and his left hand was now at Volkov's left hip, at the specific point where the hip's balance connection to the ground lived, and the pressure was small and precise, and timed to the exact moment when Volkov's own stumble had already shifted his weight past its center. Volkov went down. Not slowly, not with the gradual descent of someone being guided. He went down fast, the fast of committed weight that has lost its anchor point, and falls the way a building falls when the foundation is removed. He went down, and the stage responded to 520 pounds arriving at it, with a sound that the people in the back rows heard clearly over whatever they had been saying to each other. He landed on one knee and one hand. The referee, who had been positioned at the stage edge and who had been watching 63 seconds worth of something that his 3 years of officiating this challenge had not prepared him for, looked at the contact point. One knee, one hand. He raised his right arm. The arena came apart. 6,000 people making the sound that large crowds make when they have watched something that required them to do a significant update to their understanding of what was possible, and the update has just been confirmed as necessary. The sound lasted for several seconds before it began to resolve into anything more specific. When it did resolve, it resolved into the sound of people saying a name, the name spreading through the sections from the ringside practitioners outward, reaching the back sections with a slight delay, as the people who didn't recognize the man were told by the people who did. Volkov remained on one knee. He stayed there for several seconds. Not because he was hurt, his expression was not the expression of someone in pain, it was the expression of someone processing the specific information that they have just received for the first time in 22 years of professional competition, which is the information that the thing they have been doing can be answered in a way they had not accounted for. He looked at his own hand on the stage. He looked at where Bruce was standing. He looked at his hand again. He got to his feet under his own power. He stood at his full height. He breathed. Bruce had not moved from where he was standing. Volkov looked at him. He said something in Russian. He said it quietly and without any edge in it, not anger. Something more like a question. Bruce said, in English, "Your right shoulder commits a third of a second before your right hand initiates. It's consistent. Once you know it, you know the grab is coming, before the grab is coming." Volkov looked at his own right shoulder. He moved it slightly. He said, in accented but clear English, "You read this." Bruce said, "I was watching for it." Volkov said, "Before you came to the stage." Bruce said, "Yes." Volkov was quiet for a moment. He looked at the crowd, still responding, still producing its sustained noise. He looked at the briefcase at the stage edge. He looked at Bruce. He said, "You are not afraid." Bruce said, "Afraid of what, specifically?" Volkov made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite its opposite. He extended his right hand. Bruce took it. Their handshake was brief and firm, and the crowd responded to the image of it, the two of them together at their respective sizes, with a different quality of sound than the response to the fall, something warmer and more complicated. The briefcase sat at the stage edge. $80,000. After the crowd response settled enough for movement, the promoter, a man named Carl, who had been running this challenge for 3 years and who was currently experiencing something between professional devastation and genuine awe, approached the stage. His business model had just encountered its terminal event. The legend of the wall's invulnerability was the product. The product had a specific expiration point, and this was it. He was also watching something he had not expected to watch when he woke up that morning. He walked to the stage. He looked at Bruce. He said the money was his. He had met the terms. Bruce looked at the briefcase. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Dan Inosanto, who was standing near the stage steps with his jacket still folded over his arm, and an expression that said he had a lot to say, and was waiting for the appropriate moment. Bruce said something to Carl that the people close enough to hear repeated later. He said, "Put it toward the medical costs of the men who got hurt." Carl looked at him. Bruce said, "The 3 from tonight, and whoever needs it from the previous shows." Carl said, "That's $80,000. Bruce said, "I know what it is." He turned and walked to the stage steps and came down them the way he had gone up them, without adjustment, without apparent effort, his feet making almost no sound on the wood. He walked back to the ringside seats. He sat down next to Dan. Dan looked at him for a long moment. He said, "How many seconds?" Bruce reached into his jacket pocket. He took out the program from the beginning of the evening. He unfolded it to the page with the challenge statistics. He looked at the numbers. He said, "I wasn't counting." Dan said, "I was. 18 seconds. Bruce said, "That's enough." Dan said, "You left $80,000 on that stage." Bruce said, "I didn't come for money." Dan said, "What did you come for?" Bruce was quiet for a moment. He looked at the stage, where Volkov was still standing in the center, the announcer having recovered enough professional function to be saying things into the microphone about the evening's extraordinary conclusion, the crowd still producing its sustained response. Bruce said, "I came because someone said it couldn't be done." He said, "Not can't survive, can't be put down." I wanted to understand whether that was true. Dan said, "Is it true?" Bruce said, "No." Dan said, "So you proved it." Bruce said, "I answered it for myself. The proof is for other people." He folded the program back along its original creases. He looked at the stage one more time. Then he looked away. He said, "What are you doing for dinner?" Dan stared at him for a moment. Then he put his jacket back on. He said, "I know a place in Chinatown." Bruce said, "Good, I'm hungry." Volkov competed in 3 more challenge shows after San Francisco. He completed all 3 without collecting a successful challenger. The legend adjusted. The poster changed. The new version of it still carried the record, 272 challengers, but the fine print had been updated. 271, unsuccessful. 1 challenger achieved the terms in 18 seconds. The promoter Carl had initially resisted the inclusion of the loss in the promotional material. His advisor convinced him otherwise. The advisor said that a challenge with an unbroken record was a boast. A challenge with 1 authenticated exception, specific and documented, witnessed by 6,000 people, was a story. And stories sold more tickets than boasts. He was right. The shows that followed the San Francisco event drew larger crowds than the shows before it. People came to see the thing that had been thought impossible and had then happened once. They came the way people go to places where lightning struck, to stand in the specific geography of the impossible and feel the ground where it occurred. Volkov retired 18 months after San Francisco. The knees had been accumulating damage for 22 years and had reached their accounting. He opened a small gym in Portland with money he had saved across the challenge circuit. He taught basic strength training and occasionally told the story, once or twice a year, to students who asked about the poster on his wall. The poster from San Francisco, the updated one, he told it accurately. He said the man had weighed 140 pounds and had put him down in 18 seconds. He said the man had read his shoulder initiation from ringside before the challenge started and had known what was coming before it came. He said the lesson was not about the shoulder. He could have corrected the shoulder. He probably should have corrected it years earlier. The lesson was about the assumption that had let the shoulder go unnoticed. The assumption that none of the people trying to put him down were capable of seeing something that specific. The assumption that his size was sufficient to make detailed reading irrelevant. He said the lesson was about what assumptions cost you. He said he had carried 271 wins and 1 loss, and the loss had taught him more than any of the wins. The briefcase money was distributed by Carl across several months to the fighters who had sustained injuries in challenge shows. Some of it went to medical bills. Some of it went to men who had missed work during recovery. The accounting of it was not precise, and Carl did not publicize it. He had not been required to do any of it. He had done it because a man had asked him to, in the same tone that people use when they are asking for something they consider obvious, and the tone had made him feel that the request was in fact obvious, and he had not wanted to be the kind of person who needed more than an obvious request to do the right thing. Dan Inosanto told the story at a martial arts seminar in 1978. He said the most important thing about the evening was not the 18 seconds, which were extraordinary. He said the most important thing about the evening was the 3 nights before the evening, The 3 nights Bruce had spent thinking through what the problem actually was and how it needed to be approached. He said Bruce had understood that 520 pounds could not be moved by opposing it, that the physics were not available to a man of 140 pounds, no matter how fast or how skilled. He said Bruce had understood this without self-pity or limitation. He had simply accepted it as a parameter and built his solution within it. He said the solution was not to be stronger, the solution was to be earlier. He said that was the whole philosophy. Not to be stronger than what came at you, to see it before it arrived, and to be somewhere else when it got there. He said this was easy to say, and took 20 years to learn. He said he knew exactly one person who had learned it completely. Subscribe if this story was worth your time. Tell me in the comments what you think Volkov was actually processing in those seconds on one knee, with his hand on the stage. I read every one.